Forget those cheesy medical dramas where they yell clear and shock someone back to life.
Right.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the real deal about defibrillation. And trust me, the science is way more gripping than any TV show.
It really is. Defibrillation has evolved right alongside our understanding of cardiac arrest. It's a field where literally every second counts, and new research is constantly changing the game.
And speaking of game changers, you've requested a deep dive into this life-saving intervention, and we're serving up some eye-opening research from a recent medical journal article.
Wow.
Whether you're here for professional development, personal curiosity, or just want to be the most interesting person at your next trivia night, this information is relevant to everyone.
Absolutely.
So buckle up.
You got it. We're going to unpack why knowing about defibrillation is important for everyone, not just medical professionals.
Because let's face it, we've all seen it in movies. Someone collapses, their heart stops, someone grabs the paddles, and boom, they're back.
Well, the truth is a little more complicated than Hollywood makes it seem.
Right, so let's start with the basics. We're talking about defibrillation, but that's usually in response to something called out-of-hospital cardiac arrest.
Right, that's right. Out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is exactly what it sounds like, when someone's heart suddenly stops beating outside of a hospital setting, and unfortunately, it's much more common than people realize.
It sounds terrifying, and I'm guessing not everyone makes it.
Sadly, you're right.
Oh.
It's actually one of the leading causes of death, and survival rates are still dismally low. But that's also why we're having this deep dive today.
Because knowledge is power. So where does defibrillation fit into all of this?
Defibrillation is one of the few interventions that has been scientifically proven to make a real difference in those critical moments after someone experiences cardiac arrest.
Okay, so it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And this research we're diving into really hammered home the importance of early defibrillation. But what makes timing so crucial?
Think of it this way. After cardiac arrest, there's a brief window of opportunity called the electrical phase. It's this chaotic state where the heart's electrical activity is all over the place. Now, this is where defibrillation is most effective, during this electrical phase.
So it's like hitting a reset button while the system is still receptive to it, like before it completely shuts down.
Exactly. And the longer you wait, the more that electrical phase gives way to what we call the hemodynamic phase. This is where the heart is no longer effectively pumping blood, and the heart muscle itself is being starved of the oxygen it desperately needs.
That makes those implanted defibrillators, ICDs, sound even more incredible. They don't waste any time, do they?
You're right. ICDs are constantly monitoring the heart rhythm and deliver that shock the very second they detect a problem. That rapid response is key because in these situations, even a few seconds of delay can have dire consequences.
Wait, really? You're saying even those brief pauses to set up the defibrillator or check a pulse can have a huge impact? Every second matters that much.
You got it. And that's what's so fascinating about this research.
Wow.
You wouldn't think a few seconds would be a matter of life or death, but sadly it can be. Every second that passes without defibrillation, the chances of survival decrease dramatically. We're talking a 7–10% drop for every minute that ticks by. Every single interruption, every pause, whether it's before, during, or after a shock, all of that adds up and can drastically reduce someone's chances of survival.
Wow. That's a truly sobering thought. It's like that old saying, time is money, but in this case, it's so much more literal.
Right.
Time is life.
It really is, and that's why there's been a huge push to minimize those pauses, to shave off every possible millisecond during CPR and defibrillation.
So how are they doing that? What are some of those strategies?
Think of it like a perfectly choreographed dance.
Okay.
The guidelines now recommend keeping those chest compressions going while the defibrillator is charging. Someone else can be prepping the device, getting those pads ready so there's no interruption in that vital blood flow.
So it's about multitasking, making every movement count. So no more pausing to check for a pulse after a shock.
You've got it. It's all about maximizing efficiency. Those precious seconds are better spent maintaining blood flow with continuous compressions. Checking for a pulse can wait.
And this is where it gets really futuristic, right?
Yeah.
I've heard about research into doing compressions straight through the shock.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what? Shocking someone while also doing compressions.
You heard right. It's called hands-on defibrillation, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's cutting-edge stuff, and I'll admit it makes some healthcare providers nervous, but early studies suggest it could be a real game changer.
Wow. So less Hollywood drama, more practical efficiency for better outcomes.
Right.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But what about those situations where those shocks, even the perfectly timed ones, don't seem to do the trick? I'm talking about what you call refractory VF, right?
Right.
When those multiple shocks just don't work, what happens then?
That's when things get really interesting, and researchers have had to get creative. Refractory VF is a huge challenge, but there are some promising new approaches.
Like what? Give me the inside scoop.
Well, have you heard of double-sequential defibrillation?
Two defibrillators at once.
Ah.
Now that's what I call bringing out the big guns. But seriously, how does that even work?
It's not quite as dramatic as two simultaneous zaps. It's more like a 1-2 punch, delivering a more powerful, coordinated shock that can sometimes be more effective in those incredibly stubborn cases.
And the research on that is looking promising.
The latest research suggests it can significantly improve survival rates, especially in those tough refractory cases. And it's not just about bigger shocks. Researchers are also exploring medications like beta blockers.
Wait, beta blockers? I thought those were for high blood pressure. What do they have to do with defibrillation?
That's right, they are typically used for high blood pressure. But imagine the surge of adrenaline that happens after the heart restarts. It's like a roller coaster, and that surge can sometimes be too much too fast. Beta blockers might be able to help smooth out that transition, calm things down a bit, and potentially make it easier for the heart to settle into a stable rhythm.
So it's about managing the whole system, not just jump-starting the heart. It's like rebooting your computer. You might need to clean up some corrupted files, not just hit the power button for it to work properly.
That's a great way to put it, and it highlights another crucial factor, the importance of managing any underlying conditions like electrolyte imbalances. You see, things like potassium and magnesium levels in the body can directly impact how well the heart responds to defibrillation.
So if those levels are out of whack,
Hmm.
it's like trying to play a video game on a system that can't handle it.
Right.
It's not going to end well no matter how many times you reset it.
Exactly. Addressing those underlying imbalances is just as critical as the defibrillation itself. It's about giving the heart the best possible chance of recovery.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the importance of timing to these cutting-edge techniques. But what about those more, shall we say, unique situations? Like, what if a child needs defibrillation? Or someone with a pacemaker? It could be one size fits all, right? You're absolutely right. It's definitely not one size fits all. Kids are not just small adults. So I'm guessing defibrillation for a child is very different.
You're right to think that. With children, the energy levels used for defibrillation are much lower. We have to take into account the smaller size of their hearts. It's like using a lower heat setting on a delicate fabric. You want to get the desired outcome without causing any damage.
Makes perfect sense. And what about those situations where someone has a pacemaker? Can you even defibrillate someone if they have a pacemaker?
Yes, you absolutely can defibrillate someone with a pacemaker, and it's perfectly safe. But just like with kids, there are special considerations. For example, we need to be mindful of where we place the defibrillator pads. We want to make sure they're a safe distance away from the pacemaker itself to avoid any interference. Again, it all comes back to adapting to the specific situation and using those critical thinking skills.
Okay, so we've gone from clear on TV to chest compressions, electrolyte levels, and even special situations for kids and pacemakers. It's amazing how much goes into this one life-saving procedure.
It really highlights the complexity of the human body and the incredible science that goes into keeping it going.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up for our listeners, what are some of the biggest takeaways from our deep dive into defibrillation? What we really need to remember?
If you take away just one thing from our conversation today, let it be this. Early defibrillation is absolutely crucial. Those first few minutes are absolutely critical. For every minute that passes without defibrillation, the chances of survival plummet. Time is truly of the essence.
It's like what they say about real estate. It's all about location, location, location. Well, defibrillation is all about timing, timing, timing. And minimizing those pauses during chest compressions, that seems huge. Every second really does count.
Exactly. And what I find particularly fascinating is that this research pushes us to think beyond just the mechanics of defibrillation. If every single second is so precious, what does that mean for improving our emergency response times? How can we empower even more people to perform bystander CPR? These are questions that have real-world implications.
It really makes you think about all the different pieces that have to come together to save a life. It's inspiring, really.
Yeah.
So to our listener, we hope this deep dive has left you feeling empowered, informed, and maybe even a little bit in awe of the science that goes into something as incredible as restarting a heart. This is life-saving information, so keep exploring, keep asking questions, and who knows, you might just save a life someday.